like the CEO, right? That he almost failed. This is what I know. He almost failed his MBA final project because that was his professor didn't think that a menu with 3 items on it could. Is that correct? Did I get that right, Lynette?
I do think that is right. Yeah.
And he owns a house here on the lake at LSU too.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And we got Pam, we got Miss Tanya. Hello. Good morning.
Hello.
I hope y'all are not judging me. I do have my maroon cup today, but my alma, they won the national championship. I'm going to support them.
I watched that game after 42 awards. That's probably one of the few reasons I stayed up. They deserved it. That was awesome.
I saw the final winning, the best part.
I'm not judging. You know, I work with Randall, and he's a Mississippi State alum as well. So I'm used to it.
Yeah, he
I'll just
openly
say that I
wears.
guess. Go ahead.
Well, he openly wears his hat. See, I wouldn't do. I'm not allowed to wear it at home, but I can have my cup.
Yes, he wears that hat every single day, and we've all gotten him LSU caps, and he just laughs. And he has like a Mississippi State flag hanging in his office, and like all that stuff. And we just laugh at him and go on about our business. But he's great, so I support him and his love for Mississippi State.
You were saying something else, Lynette?
I was going to say the first weekend in September, though, I'm not going to let you do Mississippi State because Louisiana Tech plays Mississippi State.
Oh, I would not do that. No, I live in Louisiana now. Yeah, that's not fair. All right, we have a little group, but we're going to go and get ahead and get started because we have a lot to cover, and we have 57 minutes left before open office hours. And Lynette, I am joined by Lynette Abear today. We're going to halfway through our session, we're going to talk about how in her region she's been able to develop volunteer training for youth and adults using some of that needs assessment that we produced earlier this year. And I've been able to kind of watch that process evolve, and I'm just kind of amazed by it. And also, I think that they've done a really phenomenal job of producing, or at least producing a plan for a training that's based on, the current needs that we're seeing with our volunteers and our youth. And so I hope that she'll spend some time talking with us about that. So this is our Lunch and Learn. This is volunteer training. So if you've joined us these last few months or last year even, this is my second year at the Ag Center. So we're doing volunteer development training for our agents in a virtual form every month from April to October. This year, we're going through the iSocher method. Every month, we have a different topic on iSocher. We discuss that topic, and then we also incorporate some group discussion in some activities, working in breakout rooms together to produce a deliverable that we can take back to our parish programs and hopefully implement within our volunteer development program at the parish and the regional level. So I'm zipping through this early part of the slides today, obviously, because we got a lot to cover, but today's topic is volunteer training. So we've been through the identification selection as well as orientation. And last month we went through orientation and talked about how it was not just training. So orientation and training are two different things. As we know, orientation starts at the onset when we're first interacting with those volunteers and orienting them into our program. We have several agents within our program that use the parent orientation to also orient their volunteers as well as sign up volunteers for the program. But when we're talking about training, what we need to do is allow our volunteers to develop those essential skills that's necessary to perform their role. And as you know, my research interest and area is in this volunteer empowerment. So if we're looking at autonomy, giving our volunteers more competence and allowing them to have more autonomy in those roles, providing them with the knowledge and that expertise is critical. It's essential. Also, it allows them to get that support that they need and to develop personally, so personal growth. And as we're going to discuss today, when we look at that needs assessment, our training needs to be relevant and it needs to be updated annually. So if we're using the same training program that we've used throughout the years, we know that our volunteers have evolved, we know that our youth have evolved, and in the last 2 years of our program, we know that our program has evolved. So if we're not looking at those trainings and updating them annually, making sure that what we're doing is relevant, we're really potentially not providing our volunteers with the training that they need. And another thing that we're going to discuss today is the training delivery modes. And so when we think about training, we often think about this in-person model. So we're going to our parish office or we're going to our school and we're providing that in-person training, but we have various ways of utilizing or delivering training to our volunteers. And we're going to discuss many of those today because within the needs assessment, our volunteers have actually told us that they prefer training delivered in multiple ways, not just this in-person model. Obviously not the virtual model that we've been able to provide them during this pandemic, but they've also talked about PDFs, electronic documents, recorded videos. And if we think about 85% of our volunteer base has a job, if we're allowing our volunteers to get on board with these trainings in different ways, we're allowing them to do it on the time that they have free, which often our volunteers don't have a lot of free time and they're time starved. So training is necessary. We know it's necessary for our volunteers to perform their roles. And you know, I love this image. I've used it before because it's from Boyce. So it's from that essential systematic approach to leadership development. It's from the ISOTR model, that foundational literature that we use, and this is from the second page of that. So if we're thinking about allowing our volunteers to develop that autonomy, to be more empowered in their role, something that is critical is that professional development. And our volunteers have told us that they recognize the importance of that continued education. And if we want to maximize volunteer engagement, we need to provide them with that training and with that relevant knowledge and information so that they can be a better leader and produce programming that's more effective for our program. And research has showed that some of the primary causes for disengagement when it comes to volunteers is that lack of educational opportunities. And we talked about this last year as well, or last month as well, when it came to orientation. So if we're not providing them those growth opportunities or the opportunities to be more professional in their role, we often potentially could lose them as a volunteer. Right. So I'm going to discuss some of the best practices when it comes to developing volunteer training. And then next, I'm going to just briefly highlight the needs assessments, what kind of came forth from that needs assessment that we did at the state level. And then we're going to do the case study and talk about Lynette and Lynette's region and how they've developed their training, their annual training for their volunteers based on the needs with volunteer voice incorporated. So briefly touching on that training delivery mode. So I talked about this a little bit earlier, but when we're thinking about training, we can produce it in various ways. We have this formal model that we often think about. So this classroom style learning, the lectures, potentially these are providing them with these discussions, scenarios, potential role playing. And then we have this more informal coaching and mentoring training. So last month, I think it was last month in the newsletter, I had an article that I had summarized on volunteer succession plans. And yesterday, I was actually talking with an agent who had a potential gap in their program because they were not able to retain a volunteer that had years and years of expertise. So we're thinking about opportunities to grow our program or to evolve our program or to create those succession plans, having that informal coaching or mentoring. So allowing your expert volunteers to potentially coach or mentor others So if you have a volunteer that's been in your program for years, and then you're looking to grow that program or produce other experts, leaders, and that potential area, something that you could incorporate at the parish level is a potential mentoring or even a job shadowing way of delivering your training. And so there's various ways of doing it. When we are developing these trainings, it's important for us to consider the specific needs of our volunteers. And there are parishes, and one of which I talked to yesterday, that have done a really good job of taking this large group of volunteers, doing the essential or critical training that's important every year, but then splitting those volunteers out into specific topic areas. So, potentially not everybody needs to do one portion of training. So we're breaking them out into groups, and possibly we have, volunteers helping us leading in those different topic areas. So that's important. Based on expertise level, we should think about ways that we are dividing up those trainings that we're producing. And as we've already discussed, training requirements change, right? So information changes, and we need to make sure that every year we're looking back at those training programs and that the information that we're providing is up to date and relevant. And one thing that we've found, at least going through this needs assessment, is that our volunteers really like those handouts. And in 4-H, we love handouts. We give lots of handouts. We provide lots of potential activities back to our volunteers that they can implement within their programs. So having that, a handout with its electronic document, something that they can reference later, later on after their studies or after their training has been completed, and involving other volunteers in the training. So helping them, allowing them to lead potential training, but also just being involved and allowing those new volunteers to build relationships with other volunteers. So that's essential and important as well. And if you're not already doing so, which I know Dynamics does a little bit of this, but if we need to be monitoring the checklists or providing checklists of the training that our volunteers are completing, and we can do some of this in Dynamics, but I do know some programs that will keep records or keep files of volunteers and the training that has been provided. There's a reason why all of the modules, even the elected ones, do produce that volunteer certificate, that completion certificate, so that they can capture that and pass it on to the parish office for their file. And also, if your volunteer is working towards, a master volunteer portfolio, they have that certificate that they can use and input into their portfolio when they are going up for those different levels of master volunteer. And we've been through, this pandemic, and one things that we've learned is that some of the training that we produce can be done in a virtual form. And so if we're looking for ways to be more efficient, to reduce resources, thinking about what models of our volunteer trainings or what information can be easily produced in a virtual form. Now, obviously, the drawback of this is that it's a lot harder to build these relationships when we're working virtually with our volunteers, but there are, these potential updates, monthly updates about what's going on in the program, any potential changes. These are often opportunities where you can provide that training virtually. And then also when it comes to flexibility, allowing more flexibility for your volunteers who don't always have all the time available to participate in an in-person session. Right? So before we start chatting with Lynette, I wanted to go over the needs assessment from this past year. So I know that if all of you got the email, several emails about the needs assessment. We had one for agents and as well as one for volunteers. And overall, we had a pretty good response rate. We had over 170 responses. And during a pandemic, I thought that was pretty good. And so it told us a lot of good information about what our volunteers need currently, and some information that's really critical to our 4-H agents knowing and developing training, as well as our regents in developing collaborative trainings. And so volunteers reported that they received most of the information that they were getting from our website. And so you know that we've been actively updating that, trying to make that section on our 4-H website for volunteers a lot more information available to them, a lot more up to date, so that they can, you know, go online and click on, you know, whatever it is that they need from that Louisiana 4-H website. But they also mentioned several times that most of what they get is from agent emails. So if that's agents forwarding information that they get from the state office, so potentially my volunteer email or another specialist email, you know, they were often getting those forwarded to them, but information that they were getting to help run their program or potential training was coming directly from those agent emails and the website. They also reported that the Moodle trainings, and we know this, have been underutilized. And we know this because they're outdated training modules that are also going through review and being revised, relaunched right now. But that the one that was used most heavily was the risk management. And they also were using the recorded and leader webinars, the ones that we've been doing with the VLA, more often than the Moodle trainings. And there were several thoughts I had to this. As one, we just been marketing them, I think, a little bit more, pulling those now that we have a volunteer mailing list. So that information comes directly from me as well as from the agent, but that the Moodle site did go through an update. So there potentially could be some, I guess, barriers to accessing it. And then also I think the information may potentially in the leader webinars might have been just a little bit more relevant, at least to what they were wanting, electing to watch or to participate in at the time. And they also talked about, you know, the ways that they wanted the training provided to them. And so we have, you know, PDF and printable packets. I know that Lynette's on this call, so I'll mention it again. With the leader series, all of that material was produced in a PDF or printable packet form. And so the thoughts I had for that was potentially if we're providing them with those electronic documents, they are more easily being able to access those, you know, read them at their leisure, but also replicate them as well if it's in that kind of PDF or printable packet. And then second to that was also that in-person event. So opportunity to interact with other volunteers, but the opportunity to interact with, you know, their 4-H agent or other professionals in that in-person setting. And then third was actually the recorded video. And after that, if you're curious, was the live webinar. So, you know, they want the webinars to happen, but they want them to be recorded and they want to watch them later at another time. And that is okay. We also asked them about the best place to put, you know, potential resources and training, and they did say that the 4-H website, the state website, as well as their parish webpage, and an email newsletter would potentially be the 3 ways that they would like to get information about training and resources. Some other kind of topical requests that were made from our agents. So they have requested a Louisiana 4-H volunteer handbook. This was the one that was highest requested. And we do have a club leader guidebook that we produced this past year, but I think I've talked with a few people about making that more inclusive, a little bit more broad in its focus. So a volunteer handbook that's available to all volunteers. Awards and recognition for youth was ranked really, really high, as well as these new methods of potentially teaching youth. So I guess there's some conversation here potentially about the Thrive model and, you know, what the implications for that for our program. Leadership development for youth was referenced several times. Fundamentals of 4-H was on there, but only for about half of that volunteer base. But for many of them, it was ranked rather high. And something that we thought was kind of interesting was grant writing and fundraising was one of the higher requested, as well as record books. And I think we're going to hear a little bit more about that in just a moment. And then leadership aspects and leadership roles in that critical area, the higher ranked needs were those different committee functions, as well as the mechanics, working mechanics of a 4-H club. Third was program planning, was ranked third in this area. And then in leadership roles, recruitment of 4-H members was the highest ranked. The role of the 4-H leader is also ranked highly, as well as working with other leaders or other 4-H volunteers was also ranked high in this area. And in the area of program development and recognition, so that 4-H teaching tools and methods, and this is actually going to be addressed, I think, several times. We had a luncheon, or we had a volunteer webinar on service learning, virtual and in-person, as well as the difference between service learning and experiential learning was talked about. So sometimes I think there's some questions there, or at least so that is one area that has come up. And then opportunities and awards for members was ranked really, really high. And opportunities and awards for leaders was ranked not necessarily as high as opportunities and awards for members, but I do believe because we gave them that option that they did often select, well, I'd like to know about opportunities and awards for leaders as well. This is really a brief overview of that needs assessment. I've presented it in the Southwest region, and I have a long document drafted of it that I will summarize at the state level and send out with the PowerPoint presentations. But just a quick recap for those of you that's joining us today, some of the stuff that did come out that we thought was very, very interesting that our volunteers did say. The other piece of that needs assessment was the agent side, and I won't talk about that today on this call, but I will provide a summary of what the agents asked. And we asked them questions about the needs for their volunteers, as you know, if you've completed it, but also what they needed in the area of volunteer development. And so we had a lot of good information that came forth of that assessment that we'll be using at the state office level as well, at developing programs for our agents. And a couple of action plans that I've just come forth of this needs assessment before I turn it over to Lynette. The first thing, obviously, is all the training modules are being redesigned. And if you're on that committee or have been involved in that committee, you know that we're currently going through 3 of them, one of which is hopefully done in the next few weeks. That's just a screenshot of that new leader orientation. And we are introducing new modules that will be able to fill those core gaps. So I know, for example, financial literacy was one, or financial management, was an area of need. And then opportunities for youth to lead 4-H educational experiences was something else that was identified by several agents as regions as well. So filling in those critical gaps. Also, with the volunteer leader webinar series, we're going to cover various topics, address the needs that they've identified at the state level in a more broad way. But, you know, as a parish program or regional program, you have opportunities to implement more in-depth training and also, you know, developing those more collaborative relationships with your volunteers. And I believe those trainings will be more effective at the parish and regional level. And also within the newsletter, we're hoping that when I produce those, that you all will continue to share that material as we produce more and more information within that volunteer newsletter at the state level. And I'm always open for suggestions and ideas of how to make it better. I do watch the analytics, and we do get quite a bit of exposure through that newsletter, but making sure that when I send it out to you, that it's available in a way that you can just forward it on to your leaders without having to do any additional work. And so that's what I try to provide at the state level. All right, any questions on the needs assessment before we turn it over to Lynette and talk about what she's been able to do in the Southwest region? No questions yet. That's okay. When breakout rooms, they can be chatty. All right. So Lynette, I don't think you need an introduction because I think everybody knows you, but yeah, so I asked Lynette to talk about the Southwest region's volunteer training planning and process, so she's going to spend some time talking about that. They were able to go through kind of that needs assessment and draft some potential training plans. And I'm not going to take words from her. I'm going to have her spend a few minutes talking to y'all about what they've been able to do in their region. So Lynette, you can take it away.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Thanks for having me today. So just to kind of give a foundation, how we designed our regional-based committee, we did take an approach where we incorporate both teen volunteers and adult volunteers. Southwest region is comprised of 14 parishes, so we try to have a representative from every parish, whether that's a teen, adult, or an agent. So we do about a third of each representation. So we'll have a third of teens, a third of adult volunteers, and then a third of agents. Those adult volunteers will be some club leaders, some project leaders. We try to have a VLA representative on that committee. Our teens, we typically call upon our state level, whether it's the executive committee or some of our board representation to sit on that committee. And then we have representation from the agents. So I guess if you think about that as a parish level, you want to make sure that you're representing all parts of your parish. The teen adult partnership has worked well in our region. Sometimes we've had separate action plans for the audiences, but sometimes, a lot of times we're doing combined action plans, and we'll talk about that a little later. We have, because of the size of our region and the travel issue that we face, we've been doing our committee member meetings virtually for several years. So that has been a tool that we've used for several years. To prepare them as committee members, I do send out what is the role of the committee, their expectations as a committee member, and then just some general information to prepare them for the committee. And when we look about that information, so far as needs assessment, the information that we send out to them is we always try to do a summary and evaluate previous efforts. So I'll send that to the committee members, the results, the impact report from the last year, last 2 years, regional efforts. We also do a survey with the agents and volunteers. We ask the agents to send it out to some volunteers. I'll send it out to the committee members. So just to assess their current needs for that year. So that goes out region-wide. We do incorporate state level, like this year, Megan and Sarah did present the state level evaluation. So they get that ahead of time to kind of review. We have discussions about that. But then during the actual committee meeting, we just do brainstorming. We think about, when we fill out a survey, we think of things, but then as you talk to people and you share observations, more needs will surface. So we tend to do just a general brainstorming based on the needs assessment. We'll, during our committee meeting, we'll say, well, based on what you saw in the surveys, what are some things that's some, prevalent things that we need to think about? Well, beyond the survey, what are the things that you're observing? So we kind of combine all that together. In the virtual setting, we use the Jamboard this year. And then after we kind of brainstorm all that, then we actually start to prioritize needs. This year and most years we'll do what are needs of adult volunteers, what are needs of youth volunteers, and then what are the needs that are shared between the adult and youth audiences. Based on that prioritization of needs, then we start to develop action plans. And the action plan this year, kind of like Megan talked about, we're going to do some different type of deliveries. Typically we do a one-day on-site event. Last year, of course, we switched to virtual, but this year our action plan is to do an adult and teen one-day event, and typically, and we will continue that this year, we try to train parish teams of youth, adult, and agent. So a team of about 5 to 8 individuals will come to represent. We train them on the program and then give them the resources to go back and implement it in their parish. So we will be hosting a one-day event for teen and adults throughout the region, but we're also doing a webinar series on records. how to work, just understanding records, and then how to work with records with others to provide leadership for the records. And then, of course, every year we also come up with a theme or some kind of promo. And this year, the Southwest region is buzzing with leadership. So that's why you see the B on the screen. So that's a little synopsis of how we handle the committee work and focus on needs assessment. Any questions, Megan? If there's something else that you wanted me to cover?
I just think it's a phenomenal process, honestly, because how long have you been doing it this way, Lynette? Or maybe it's been a requirement.
No, I think it's probably been about 10 plus years that we've, initially when I came on in the Southwest region, we were very adult focused. And as our program recognized, the importance of youth adult partnership and youth voice, we transitioned to this model.
And I've seen the plan for this coming year, and it's very exciting. But last year too, you had, I don't know if you want to just touch on what was developed last year, because I thought it was quite relevant to what we were experiencing.
So last year, yeah, we did 2 webinars. One was leading in a virtual setting, and the other one was COVID related. And I think the COVID related one, it's on the state level that others can pick up. So the other thing we've done, we did not plan it this year, we talked about it, was we've tried to make an effort, like when we did the regional based livestock training, it was targeted to agents only, but when we did here, we to both youth and adult volunteers. I think that just helps with the transition and the recognition of the importance of volunteers and having them as partners. So that's another thing that we've done. We've opened up some of our project learning, professional development that is targeted to agents. We've tried to expand that to youth and adult volunteers as well. Thanks for having me. I'll stick on if you want one of the breakout rooms too.
Sure. We got a small group today, but yeah, thanks for that. It's so, and I guess I could say you're probably open for questions if people want to email you.
Sure.
Wesley, okay, great.
Of course.
But just a great example of, every year looking at that potential trade. Oh, also adapting the model of per committee too. So doing it virtually, because understanding that all of the individuals involved in that committee have, limited time. And so allowing them to all come together in that same space, at that consistent time, developing that training in a virtual world. And then every year adapting. So what are the needs that exist in our region? We'll create this training that's really relevant to what is being faced by, our potential leaders, and then producing a training that incorporates multiple experts. So, possibly lots of agents, state level representation, volunteers and even youth leaders this year. So I just think it's a great example of what it is that we're talking about today. So I appreciate you coming on, Lynette, providing us a summary. So great. So we have 25 minutes left. So what I'm going to do, like I always do, is I'm going to share a document in the chat, and we are going to break out into rooms and work on a collaborative exercise. So if you give me a moment, I have a very simple volunteer training activity that we're going to work through, where we're going to identify a potential position and the skills, knowledge, information, as well as the attitudes that is needed to perform that role. And so I've just dropped that in the chat for you as well. There we go. And so if you have access to that document, just allow you to click on it and save it to your desktop. Just a moment. I will go through and drop it later on as well into your rooms. All right, we're back. Okay, we've got about 8 minutes left. Did everybody enjoy talking, chatting? Okay, who wants to report out? So we had 2 groups going. So somebody want to share their screen and tell me what they came up with?
Well, my sheet of paper that I typed on disappeared. I have no clue where it went.
Hey, you want to check your browser to see if it's in one of your share trays, Ms. Tanya?
No.
It was, Lynette, wasn't it actually your screen that she was typing on?
How about if I share my screen?
Megan, we were typing, but so was the other group. You could see that? You did that on purpose?
I asked you to download it. I said download it. I was going to put it in all those fancy folders, but I've been told that that's confusing, so I was trying to give you an easy option.
Yeah,
We didn't follow directions.
Oh, it's okay.
She did tell us to download it.
Megan, you know we're special and we're all hungover from 4-HU excitement last night, so you've got to really make it simple for us today.
I tried to make it a simple activity. I think y'all appreciate the simplicity of this one versus previous. Okay, well, we noticed that.
Okay, Miss Tanya, it's up on the screen. You should be able to see it.
I can see it. I got to get up close, but yeah, I can see it. All right, so our group decided that the knowledge and information the needed would be program-based knowledge, technology skills, background information in 4-H in general, and what's available. You made it smaller. Communication skills, passion for the mission, positive attitude, organizational skills, like working with youth. Trained teachers come with already a good set of knowledge and skills, but they may be lacking in others, but those will have to be identified. You want me to keep going? Knowledge and information needed. Oh, I was on the wrong one. Hello. Project club leaders have certain subject matter knowledge, but may lack others, such as ages and stages, etc. Also, let's see. I already read that. I read that in the last one. Attitudes. We need a healthy and successful performance of the position. They need to be actively engaged, not just like some teachers just sit in the back and grade papers, but your leader needs to be actively engaged, have a positive attitude, willing to learn, a friendly attitude, and then a good relationship with the parents of the youth, and a willingness to help the youth. And then how will the training knowledge be delivered? We had said both virtual and in person is important, and in groups or individually. Groups could be large or small. In all of that, in those in person and really kind of in virtual, the response to relationship building is very important. Mentoring, experienced volunteers can help new volunteers. That's a great program. And we had talked about needing a youth training component that we do the leadership and those trainings, but do we teach them actually how to teach? And then the National 4-H curriculum has a great resource. It's called Youth Advocates for Health. It's in the chat box. YA4H exclamation point. If anybody's interested. Thank you for sharing that, Lynette. Thank you all.
No, that's great. And Lynette, can I share that resource in the recap email? Okay, Youth Advocates for Help. Okay, I'm going to try to include that. This is good. It says a couple things too. I just wanted to comment on this. Some of these topics are I've been on as y'all know, I'm on the National Program Leaders Working Group. And one of the things that we're doing is we're rewriting all of the volunteer VRKCs. And so there's 25 of them. My group has 9, and communication skills, organization skills is also included. And my specific area was actually risk management, liability awareness, 4-H mission, a couple others. But some of these topics, when it comes to like the club leader and the skills, information, and knowledge that they need, at least in the broad level, will be available in those VRKCs. So it'll be very exciting when those are produced or relaunched this fall, and hopefully we can utilize those heavily within our program and not have to recreate the real wheel on some of these trainings. What about Sarah? In her group, you want to just give me a quick recap of what you guys came up with? You don't have to share if you don't want your screen, but
I'm just using Miss Lynette's real quick because Oliver's was on there for some reason. If you don't, okay. Some skills that were different, and I know we kind of like mentioned the same ones, but organization, communication, I think were the same, but being a team player was very important. We also talked about management skills, and for this one, classroom management can also pertain to this, and I think that if they're being a 4-H leader, most likely they have some kind of classroom background, and being able to manage those youth is a very important skill to have. Knowledge and information. We said that program-based knowledge. So what exactly are you doing in the program? Also having some technology skills will be helpful, or information on that, because nowadays technology is everything. And then we also said having a background information on 4-H in general. Some leaders may have never been in 4-H, or 4-H has evolved over the years, so it's different from when they were in 4-H. So just going back over it and what 4-H means, I think is important. Also knowing what's available in that parish or that school, and knowing specifics about your area is really important. And I don't think a lot of leaders know, and I think they need that. For attitudes, me and Miss Mary talked about being very positive and willing to learn, and also willing to work with others and all youth. And then how will training and knowledge be delivered? Miss Mary had a really, really good thing going in her parish, and I was like so excited because I was telling her with the needs assessment that we just did, a lot of leaders were looking for more hands-on, in-person, and things in their hands, and she really hit the nail on that one. But in her parish, and you can correct me, Miss Mary, but in her parish they do in-person trainings with all club leaders, and she was telling me that they're able to all go in, and whether it's elementary, middle, and high school, and then they break them into groups and let all the elementary talk, all the middle, and all the high schools talk, and just collaborate ideas, and like some of the old leaders get to kind of like bring up the new leaders, and I think that's a good collaboration group right there. And then they also bring in the handbook, so that's a good source for them. So
awesome, great stuff. So I appreciate y'all reporting out from the various groups. And I know Sarah and Christy were in a small group there, so I appreciate y'all working together. So I have shared the evaluation link in the chat. So if you want to go ahead and complete that evaluation for today, and it'll allow you to kind of further reflect on what we talked about. Oh, I didn't share in the chat. I put it in there and never hit send. There's that. Post 4-HU struggles on my end as well. So if you go ahead and just complete that simple evaluation for me and Lynette today, that would be phenomenal, and allowing you just to kind of reflect further on developing those volunteer training programs. I will send a recap email with the link to the training as well as the documents and then that material that Lynette shared. Also, and then if somebody could share that Word file with me that y'all were working on, that would be helpful. I like to provide those resources for those that missed the call. And so thank y'all so much for participating today. I will be on the open office hours for the next 30 minutes. So if you have questions about volunteer onboarding, selection, screening, or anything related to volunteering, please just meet me there in the next few minutes. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it.